Hello, friends, and welcome to episode 103 of the CUInsight Experience. This episode is brought to you by our friends at PSCU. We love having them as a sponsor to allow us to get to do what we do. PSCU, as the nation's premier payments CUSO, the folks at PSCU proudly support the success of more than 1,500 credit unions. My name is Randy Smith. I am one of the co-founders of CUInsight.com, and it is my job on the show to have conversations with the best and the brightest of the credit union community. I get to pick their brains and see if we can't find a few nuggets that we can all learn from. My guest on today's show is David Tuyo. David is the president and CEO of University Credit Union in California. This was a fun conversation to have, and I knew it would be. I've had the opportunity to meet David before and always enjoyed the conversation. So him and his team are doing amazing things at the credit union, and he shared a ton of that with us, and I think there's going to be some things that we really can all learn from. We talked about strategic thinking and finding that space to do it, kind of getting away from putting out fires and start being able to think again. He had some pretty cool tips on board relations and how his board meetings are run. We also dug into those leadership lessons that he's picked up along, his career, and what he thinks that we all really need to do to grow this credit union movement that we all love. 3 words: stop thinking small. As always, we wrap it up with some rapid fire questions. Who was the person that David thinks of when he hears the word success, and why? You'll have to listen to find out. So with that, I give you my conversation with David Tuyo. Enjoy. David, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
As I mentioned, this is the second episode of season 3. And in the first episode, I said I wanted to kind of get back to basics, kind of when we started the CUInsight Experience, it was that idea of taking a look at people's careers and those leadership lessons learned, over the course of a career. And there's so many just amazing people around credit unions, I think, to tell that story. But to start looking forward again, I know COVID is still here, but we don't have to talk about it all the time, right? In doing a little homework, I was like, I knew you'd just be a great guest to have on the show. So I'd love to start with that big blimp level question. You and University Credit Union had to pivot last year just like everybody else did. It was something we all had to do. Now, when we start to, look forward, one of the questions that I've been struggling with, whether it's at CUInsight or, in conversations with others, is some of those pivots were really good, even long-term for business. Others were mandatory, important, whatever you want to say for that moment. Any hacks for your fellow credit union executive out there on, kind of going through these should stay? We're past these now. How are you guys doing that? Because I know you're all about growth.
Yes, we are. And we do have a growth culture at University Credit Union, but it really just kind of reflects the universities that we serve. You look at some of the most prestigious universities in the country with UCLA and UC Davis, UC Irvine, you can go on, Pepperdine University, Loyola Marymount, so on and so forth. But I think for us, some of the things that definitely needs to stick around going forward that we've had great success with in maintaining our alignment, daily check-ins. We do a daily executive check-in and a daily check-out. And so what we discovered was that, when you're working from anywhere, you're working from home, you lose the bookends, right? So at the beginning of your day, you would commute in and you'd get in your car, you drink your coffee, you drive into the office, and then you'd have your work day and you get in the car and you drive on home. And so, you don't have that in the virtual world. So there's no way to start and stop your day. And so early on in the work from anywhere, the work from home environment, our distributed workforce, whatever term you want to apply to it, we discovered that our days and the staff, we were working 15, 18, 19-hour days. It just never stopped. You would wake up, you grab the phone, you grab your Surface, and you get to work. You grab your coffee, maybe you take a quick break for a workout or something, you're back in again, and you work through until somebody from your family nudges you and say, hey, it's time to go to bed.
Right,
and
exactly.
so we didn't want to, we wanted to make sure that we provided, hard starts and stops for the day, make sure that we maintain good work-life balance and work-life integration practices. And so we this daily check-in, check-out, it's not very long. Typically one's longer than the other one, but for us, the morning check-in with my team directly is the longer of the two. We talk about what's going on for the day, kind of almost like a CrossFit kind of situation. You have a workout of the day kind of thing, right? So this is going to be the same. What is their plan for their day, and what does the other team members need to know about as we communicate and maintain alignment with each other. And then we launch the day and go forward. Sometimes it's 15 minutes, sometimes it's 30 minutes. If we're getting into some heavier issues, for instance, like if there was a positive COVID at one of the branches and we needed those kinds of things, right? That actually would be a longer conversation to launch our plans. Or if there's something else that we needed to collaborate on, we spend time around that. But that's our time. Before we would have hallway time, we'd have drive-by time in people's doorways, those kinds of things. And so the daily check-out and check-in really allow us to, again, have bookends and then also replicate that inefficiency that allows for collaboration and innovation.
Could you talk a little bit about the check out? Because I've heard people say check in, right? Like making sure that we're all still communicating. What does the check out look like? That's a first for me, I guess, or a new one for me.
Yeah. I mean, I think in the past, people use that in a meeting, kind of check in, check out. I've heard others use it that way, but we use it for our days. And the daily check out really is just kind of, again, you got to have a hard stop to your day. And, and so for our team members, for the executive team, it's a good way for us to kind of address things that may come up throughout the day that need attention and need discussion right then and there, immediate things. And sometimes it's a quick checkout. And many times it is. It's just a 15 minutes what went on. But when you think about the environment and the information coming at us so quickly, in the state of California, we have daily updates from our governor at noon. We have our daily mayor updates at 1. We have our daily health officials at 2. And so we have our work that's happening throughout the day. And then on top of that, we have this new information that we have to now either somehow consume and then decide if there's action or no action. And so either way, it's informative. And so we need to, this is a framework that we were very intentional about, and we actually implemented it throughout the entire organization. So everyone is doing this. Yes, we did add more meetings. Yes, there is more meeting time, but those are things that we definitely want to keep going forward. The team all enjoys it, and we actually feel disconnected. One of our newest team members to the executive team is our CFO. His name's Serge Risk, a very talented individual, been in credit unions for some time, but he's only been with us for a short time. And he took 2 weeks off for the holidays. When he came back after the holidays, I really I can see how connected I am. And now I really miss that interaction. So you can tell that there's a psychological benefit to this as well, not just for business.
I love it. We've at CUInsight, we've been remote for like 5 years now, right? But it's always been like, and I would say really when you're bringing on new folks to the team, those of us that used to be in an office together, we have that connection we always had, right? Like we knew each other well. Lots of lunches and happy hours and all that. But for new folks, and you do want to make sure you have that connection. Without conferences and things right now, it's even tougher, it seems like. So I love that idea. I think it's fantastic. It kind of plays a lot into like what you were saying, like making sure that there is a definite, shut down, like not working the 15-hour days. That was a direction I really wanted to go. This idea that like we all know that we only have so much bandwidth. And if we're constantly, you mentioned all the updates that you're getting on basically a daily basis from the state, the city, the health department. If you're constantly, or if we as people are constantly feel like we're putting out fires, it's tough for us to have that space to think strategically. And I know you're a strategic thinker. I know you have the growth culture there. What do you do to make sure that you have that space as the leader of the credit union?
So you have to be intentional. There are 2 people that really can affect my calendar more than anybody else. One is my executive admin support, and then me, right? Yep. And so I have a standing discipline that I only, unless there's an emergency, I keep only a limited number of hours in meetings a day. I try to limit it to no more than 6 hours of meetings a day, some days more, some days less. And then I intentionally block out focus time to try to spend time around strategy. I will tell you, for me, I do miss the windshield time. I had a lot of thinking, and during that time frame, it was just me and my own head. Yep. And, I think, in the past, we also had other avenues that would stimulate thought and then strategic thinking. But for me, the travel time was always very good, whether it was on an airplane or whether it was in the car or whatever it might be. That's when I had some of my best work. You know what I mean? I'd get to work, whether I was using a template for a foundational type of work that I was maybe taking a project on, or whether it was just freehand in a notebook, just trying to get some things going. Nowadays, it's about spending time and like this morning, take the dog for a walk, right? Spend an hour in the morning, at 5 o'clock in the morning, kind of getting going, try to spend a lot of time around purpose and those kinds of things. But strategy is something that you have to make sure you're always spending time on. We also benefit from a very rigid discipline in our board meetings. So when you look at our board meetings, we spend and dedicate a quarter of all board meetings around a strategic dialogue. And so I'm always preparing for that. And it's either finishing up work that we started in the last meeting or preparing for the next meeting. And so there's a system in place, there's a process in place to make sure that strategic discipline is not lost or is just haphazardly done in a spare time type of approach.
So in the board meetings, was that something that was in place when you came to the credit union, or was that something that you, I hate to use the term, but had to train your board members to implement something like that, right?
So a couple of things there. One, I work for a fantastically diverse, intelligent board of directors. They're all master MBAs, MDs, JDs, EDDs, PhDs, from the university community. And so it is a great pleasure to be able to partner with them at University of Credit Union. It was not in place when I got there. Over 20 plus years in this industry in banking, investments, brokerage, and credit unions. I had both for-profit, not-for-profit. I've gotten to see a lot of different ways. I've consulted with over 500 different credit unions in my career, and it's literally taking the best from each little area. And over time, had some help also from Jim Cardwell of our Cardwell Leadership in developing this framework. And that's how this thing got started. We wanted to make sure we were intentional about our design, and that's how we got to where we're at today.
Oh, I think that is powerful, especially a lot of people listen to the podcast who want to be the CEO someday, right? And I think the board relationship, until you're in that chair, you don't truly maybe fully understand it, right? Like it's a tough thing to learn, I think, without doing sometimes. So, I'm a big believer, and you just mentioned like the great board that you're surrounded by, but like we're, kind of shaped by those people who we surround ourselves with. So like, who does David surround himself with? Who are the people that have helped you in your career?
I'd be kicked out of the house if I didn't say my significant other of 20 years. She's been amazing and brilliant, steadfast in her thinking, supportive, but then also, very much iconic leader in her own right in how she approaches life and family and business. And so I could not be, luckier to partner with somebody like her. Other people in the industry,
we both sound lucky in that regard. So.
Yes. And we should be, I'm very thankful for that. In addition, I've been very fortunate to have great mentors along the way. I could name several, and just off the top of my head, obviously I would include, I'm not trying to pander to anybody, but I do think that these are people that were influential to me. CUIs as an organization has been fantastic for me in my career. The education that they provide, the networking that they provide, the institutes that they've created, I think is fantastic for education for executives and development for executives and future executives for that matter. I think NAFCU, Dan Berger and the team over there, always very good. Allied Solutions and Pete Hilger, could not speak more highly of that organization. When you look at Alan Prindle at Power Financial, definitely a major development. I worked for him for a number of years before coming to university. I could not be more grateful for his leadership and the work we did together. It was very informative to what we're doing here at university and how I look at leadership, especially as a credit union CEO. I think I would also need to call out Brent Lister at First Florida. I need to call out Kevin Johnson at Suncoast. I would need to call out Cheryl Thompson was my first CEO at U.S. Community Credit Union. She was probably one of the best leaders I've ever seen. She had a perfect balance of business and caring for the individual.
Okay.
Right.
Okay.
And it's so tough. I've had leaders where it was either one way or another, and she somehow had this perfect balance and been in the chair for about 30 years and was just a tremendous individual that I still, and this was 17 years ago now, but I still remember working with her and mentors that I had, formal and informal. Yeah. Johnny Wise at Morgan Keegan played a large role, and Raymond James now, but played a large role in my career, was a big influence in my personal life. And then also my golf coach from college. I still keep in touch with him. He's retired now and enjoying golf all by himself without teaching others.
Without teaching others, yeah.
College age kids and saying, don't do that. And how'd you get in trouble doing that? And he was seriously how he viewed life and how he approached life is something that I hope to live up to one day and continue to try to mirror. It's just amazing how many people we get to be in touch with in our lives. I mean, in Creighton land, it's a special industry. I could go on and on and on. Fred Johnson, I think at the CEO level really helped me. He once told me a really important tip around being CEO that I still use today. And so, these are just various people. I don't think, there's so many of them in our industry. Chuck Fagan at PSCU.
Yeah, absolutely.
Get a great friend, great supporter, and even friends I have today.
Can you share what Fred said to you?
Yeah, probably not appropriate for this podcast.
We'd have to check a different box, right?
That'd be different. But it was very informative. Again, I could go on. If you're in this industry and you give it all in, and you become a student of your profession, to go out there and spend time with people like yourself and with like Jill Nowacki and like Diana Dykstra at the California Creighton League. You just think about these people that we get the opportunity that will give us their time to spend time with. You can really nerd out and have tremendous growth.
That was the reason, David, that I wanted to start this podcast a couple of years ago, was because I felt so fortunate. And you and I, we've met, we've been to these conferences before, and we get to have those times, right? Like where you're having a cocktail or you're having dinner with some of these people that are so willing to share the whole, and it was like, I feel like if that would be a fun thing to tell those stories, right? Like, and just try to bring those, it's just such a blast. So I couldn't agree with you more, right?
I was talking to a Creighton CEO the other day, and he was saying, I can't believe you're telling me all this.
Yeah, you're right. Well, too, because you said, like, I originally came from the investment side, by Morgan Stanley for a decade after college, all of that. You don't share anything, right? And you worked on that other side too. You don't share anything, right? I mean, no. It's competition. So that brings me to a question that I was excited to ask you. And it's this idea of, there's a few different things going on. We're seeing a lot of innovation coming from fintech and all these places. For the last couple of years, I've asked the question: is there something that you think credit unions need to do fundamentally different to keep the relevance going forward? But with you, I mean, because you not only before you were the CEO of the credit union, you also worked with a lot of credit unions, but you also know the bank side as well. Bank satisfaction numbers, things of that nature, it's like they take hits over time, right? Like, and they have, but yet, like, our market share in credit unions doesn't seem to budge. So I guess my question, if you were the CEO of credit unions, what do we have to do different? What moves that lever?
Well, so I think when you look at that, we need to first celebrate our wins, because we do have some wins. And so when you look at and Jim Nussel put this up at GAC a couple of years ago, when you look at community banks in 1992 and where they're at today and the market share that they lost, while we've maintained our market share, I think that speaks to credit unions a little bit.
Absolutely.
Yes, although we have not seen that number jump to 30 or 40 or 50% like we all want and we think that we deserve, right? Because if any informed consumer had all the facts, how would you not choose a credit union?
Right. That's what we all think.
Yeah. I mean, but at the same time, PwC, right? PricewaterhouseCoopers came out over on Friday and said that they're forecasting that for the first time ever, that the big four banks will see primary financial institution status go above 50% this year.
Yeah. Yep.
And so, yes, to your point, those things, the challenge is there, but that gains that they've had in the banking world really has come from community banks, not so much from credit unions. And so we of course, and that size of the pie has gotten bigger. So credit unions have gotten bigger as well in actual dollar size. But from a PFI primary, or if you want to use the term preferred or whatever the nomenclature that you most associate with is great. I don't have a preference personally, but I think that from a credit union perspective, we have to take it to another level. And what that means is like, almost like when Emerald, I love Food Network. I love to eat. I love food. And so Emerald gets on there and he goes, you got to kick it up a notch, and then he'll go and go bam, bam. And it's always something, right? So if he's cooking chicken, it's going to be extra spices. If it's dessert, it's always the powdered sugar, right? There's always something that he's going to kick it up a notch and take it to another level. And I think that's what we have to do in credit union land. When you look at, a lot of people say, well, I'm a community-based financial institution. Well, what does that mean? Right? I mean, in Los Angeles, if you're a community financial institution, Los Angeles is bigger than 43 states.
Right. Yeah.
So when you start looking at that, I think that we have to become either move away from being community institutions or become hyper community focused institutions.
Okay.
So either move away and find your niche, whether it's universities or schools or maybe it's some manufacturing sector, or maybe it's a service sector or a retail sector. Maybe there's a particular subsector of all that of which I described that you want to try to focus in on that's really narrow to where you can understand that consumer and that customer base, which we will memorize over time, of course, better than anybody else. Then at that point, you can get true differentiation. You can become, and maybe it's a blue ocean situation where you can actually have expense reduction and value creation at the same time. I don't know what that's going to look like for different parts of the country, but it can happen. We're doing it at University Credit Union. I've seen it happen at other credit unions as well. But I think you got to go one way or the other. You got to get off this fence of just community. There's so much more to that. So those kinds of things.
I remember talking to, I think it was Brent Dixon years ago when we first started CUInsight, and he had this idea around, and it reminds me a lot of what you're talking about is like people move jobs, people move, whatever it happens to be, but they don't tend to move those things that connect them to it. So if you're a teacher, you're probably always going to be a teacher. If you're an outdoors person, you're probably, doesn't matter where you live, who you work for, you're still going to be I think like REI and people like that have really concentrated on that. So just something that popped into my head that is, I hear where you're coming from there.
But think about REI, like that's a great example. I mean, when they know what their niche is, they know what they're trying to do, they know who they serve.
Yep.
And then they found ways to reduce cost. And how do they do that? Yeah. Have you ever been to any of their garage sales?
Yeah. Yep. Absolutely.
I mean, what a brilliant idea, right? Yep. So they take the returned items that don't have tags anymore that they can't resell, and they do this garage sale. They sell it at a fraction of the cost, but they're still reducing their overall expenses, and they're adding value to their customer base. And it's just really neat how there's so many great things that can be done for sure.
I love it. I want to move on a little bit to your career journey. Do you remember that moment where you were just like, credit unions? This is it. This is what I want to do. Because I don't think a single one of us grew up going, someday I'm going to work at a credit union, right?
So as somewhat of an academic, I can actually pinpoint the time when I first learned about credit unions. And it was in an investments class my junior year in college, undergrad. And I'll never forget it. And it was a 3-line synopsis in our book that talked about credit unions. It was actually on the exam. My investment professor actually did an on-site at the local credit union with our class to kind of teach us about banking and how and investments and how that applied, because they were allowed the class to come in and learn and talk to the CFO about what the investment strategy was and how they're leveraging, things like duration, convexity. You remember that from your Morgan Stanley days. So those kinds of, and it was really interesting. But outside of that, for me, I was always thinking, I grew up in time with Family Ties and Michael J. Fox as the nerd carrying around the briefcase. And
we are about the same age, my friend.
And so those are things that I really, those are things that were kind of informative to my character and who I was, and they had their influence on who I wanted to become. And so I was always thinking, banking. I didn't even think about credit union at all. And as I worked with different institutions, I worked with pension funds, I was working with insurance companies, I was working with banks and credit unions. At one point, I just kind of got sick of the short-term mentality of always trying to reach the next quarterly earnings call. And so as working at a seventh largest bank in the country at the time, I was like, there's got to be something more to this. And I was serving credit unions and insurance companies, pension funds. And I just fell in love with the idea of people helping people. And coming from, high school in Alabama and kind of the southeastern United States, those kind of core values affected me. And I wanted to really lean into that and be more of of what makes that part of the country so great around helping people and helping your neighbor and, just basic good human nature type things that you should do to help one another and ultimately really love one another, right? That's what we're supposed to be doing. And so I moved on to credit unions, and that was in 2002. I went to work for Southeast Corporate Federal Credit Union, and then I went to a credit union in Nashville, Tennessee after that. And it was off the races. So in credit unions, financial services, more than 20 years, in credit unions now for 17.
All right, 2 questions.
Or 19.
Alabama to LA. How's that transition?
Well, it's been a fun ride. So, Alabama to Nashville to Jacksonville, Pensacola, Miami.
Okay. Okay.
So I got to see a lot of different markets. I've seen small markets, seen large markets. Got to work for community-based organizations, got to work for very seg-based, focused on military. And then also, at Power, we were community-based, but seg-based in South Florida.
Right.
It's been around the block a little bit. Moving from Miami to LA was a nice transition. I am very thankful for the stop in Miami. I'm not sure you can go from Jacksonville, Florida to Los Angeles without some type of shock. But
right.
Los Angeles is fantastic. If with 19 million people in the greater LA area, if you can't find people to hang out with, you might have a problem.
It might be on you, right?
Yeah.
So.
and there's a lot of stigma around California. It's a fantastic place. It's one of the greatest places I've ever lived. The people are phenomenal. People really do want to do what's right. There are differences of opinion, of course, but that's anywhere in the United States. And I tell you what, the diversity is just phenomenal. And for having teenagers in the house, now 13 and 15, I just loving every minute of it.
Oh, that's fantastic. Yeah, I'm a fan of the area. So the question that I didn't take out this year, what was the inspiration for you to take the gig as the CEO of University Credit Union? And since becoming the CEO, did the inspiration change at all?
It's a good question. You always ask these tough questions, right? I don't know why it's supposed to be a pleasant conversation. No, I'm just kidding. But so I would say the inspiration was looking at University Credit Union. I looked at it from several different sides. So when the recruiter first called me to say, "Hey, would you be interested in this? I think it might be a good fit." Immediately, I was like, "No, I'm really happy where I'm at. I had a great CEO, fantastic board. Team was great. We had been there for a number of years. So kind of things were, the changes we made, we're seeing the results. We're making further changes in innovation to continue to strive towards further growth. And so I wasn't really looking. But then I looked at the financials at university. I looked at some different things online from a digital brand perspective. What was the reputation online? And that I reviewed their app. And finally, I called their call center. And so I called the call center and it acted like I was some random member or non-member trying to join. And then I started to get really excited. I looked at, UCLA. They had just signed, this is before I got there, but they had just signed an agreement with another large credit union that was a competitor in the space. And so, there obviously was some major challenges. They'd been through some heavy turnover of the executive ranks and had some openings. And so, you start putting it all together. I know it doesn't sound attractive, but for people like you and me, it's pretty exciting, right? So you're like, wow, there's so many things that we could improve on and really make a difference, right? That you can know that you can make a difference and help this credit union become, a regional powerhouse for the university community. And that's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to be the best credit union, the best financial service provider for the very community that founded us. And from an inspiration perspective, how's it changed going forward? I think that, probably through the pandemic and everything else. I know we don't want to talk about COVID. It's a word that
it's almost
still
like here. So
it's almost like it's almost like Harry Potter, right? The disease that should not be named. And so with COVID, I think originally for me it was about helping people realize their potential and unlock that potential that they can really get to from a business perspective. And now that's changed to being more about the whole person. And so support them through what they're dealing with. If it's a single parent with kids at home that are now homeschooling, if it's, sickness or illness of a loved one, we've had several, of course, that have had the unfortunate events of death in the family as well, and just helping them through the difficult times, supporting them through the difficult times, and just building this amazing culture and team where they know that no matter what, we got their back. And I no doubt believe that they have ours. It's this really special culture at university and these 100 plus amazing, extraordinary individuals that comprise. That's what inspires me more than anything else.
That's beautiful. This is a question I added this year. Is there something that you used to do that helped you get to where you are in your career that if you just kind of sit there and you go, why don't I do that anymore? that you just quit doing?
Wow, that's a really good question. I think that for me, something I used to do that I don't do now that I wish I think you might stop me there, Rand. Because I research and read more than I ever have.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm still very active from exercise and physical routine. I don't know if there's anything that I used to do that I wish I still do today. I stopped doing some things that I'm glad I stopped doing, but other things, I think honestly though, I think over this past, during this time as this turnaround at university, I think I wish I would do again is I wish I would do better job at being more intentional in my networking.
Okay.
I think I have developed over the years a very good network that's of thought leaders, of great people I look up to, and either people I can help or people that have helped me. And I think I would like to do more of that and build a better network.
Yeah. When you're put your head down, right? You've got something to accomplish. Sometimes that can get away. I'll tell you, I added the question because I found myself after a few months of COVID or whatever, I stopped doing a few things that are really good for me, like journaling and meditation, things I was just got away from it somehow because it was putting out fires, I think, and not giving myself the space. And I'm like, I wonder if other people have quit stuff that they're like, I should do that again. Is there, you mentioned a lot of the leaders that you've worked with in your network. Is there a myth? You mentioned one who you said had that perfect balance, but is there a myth of like what people think it takes to be a good leader that you just think is, dead wrong?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of things actually. This could be a whole different podcast.
This is the whole show.
This is a whole different show. And it's from life experience and just being around the block, and consulting also helped kind of influence this as well. We have in the world this idea that CEOs are not operational, that they're supposed to just sit there and say corporate isms and ultimately just, be rainbows and unicorns and be this perpetuators of fluff. And that's not true at all. I think the best CEOs are operational. Now, they're not making decisions every day and being operational in that perspective, but they are understanding what's going on a daily basis in the organizations. They're understanding what the service levels are. They're understanding what their teams are going through. They're understanding the challenges their teams are facing. And then ultimately, they're helping either remove hurdles or provide resources that will remove those hurdles and help the team get to be their best. And you can't do that sitting in an ivory tower. You can't do that going around and just, making nice chit chat. You need to be intentional about knowing what's going on. You need to be setting up design and systems thinking processes within the organization that allow communication to be both bottom up and top down. So that way you can get a full idea of what's going on and then help support your team to the greatness that you know that they can achieve.
Good stuff. Outside of credit unions, what does David do to recharge? You mentioned working out in the family. What's that work-life integration look like for you?
Randall, something else that we have in common is that we're both from Michigan, right?
Oh, so that's right.
I'm originally a Flintstone before I adopted Alabama as my home, and I think you grew up wanting to be
Red Wing, Royal Oak, Michigan. So
there you go. And so for me, it was like Greg Hanlon and Steve Eisman. That was kind of the era that I was in.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So
Gerard Gallant, come on,
absolutely, yes. We had the jerseys, and that's back when we said, the wings are always good. I don't know what happened.
Absolutely, right.
But awesome. we had the wings. We don't talk about football because we had the Lions.
We have the Lions,
outside Barry Sanders. But with regards to recharging and how we and my family, we try to be as healthy as we can be, right? So obviously, physical exercise. One of my mentors once said, David, life is a three-legged stool. And this is a chair from one of my board of directors. His name's John Milton. He lives in Jacksonville, Florida now. And he said, you have one leg that is physical, one leg that is mental, one leg that's spiritual. And you need to make sure that you take care of all three legs. And if one leg's short of another, the bar stool is going to tip over. And so I try to address those three in a very equal way, from spiritual with daily devotions and continuing to build in my relationship and my faith. And then also physical, as I mentioned, around working out and trying to eat healthy. I do like fried food. I really do. And, but I do try to limit that. And then finally, mental, right? I want to invest in mental well-being, and I'm in constant pursuit of knowledge. And I think that's a mantra of mine where I want to be a student of profession, a student of life. And I think probably one of my favorite quotes that I keep with me near and dear and close to my heart is, you want to live as if you're going to die tomorrow, but you want to learn as you're going to live forever. And I think, the way that you live your life, I think is very inspirational, by the way, and that you very much are representing that quote. And again, I think it's something that would summarize my approach as well.
That's awesome. Yeah. Constantly learning. That's for sure. So much to experience. That's
sometimes, Randall, it takes us a little bit longer, a little bit hard way to learn than the easy way. But yeah.
I've said it over and over again. I tend to touch the stove twice before I learn. So I'm not sure why. I'm hoping that I get better at that at some point. But so it wouldn't be the CUInsight Experience podcast without some rapid fire question. I've mixed in a few new ones with some of the old that I held on to. The questions are rapid. Your answers don't have to be, though. So you kind of mentioned this earlier, and I almost jumped to it, but I wanted to leave it for the end of the show. Is there something that you said no to that you're glad you did?
Yeah, I was actually, over the last few years, I was offered a position as a CEO of a bank. Okay. And I turned it down. And that was probably one of the best decisions I made because it was not a good cultural fit. And thankfully, earlier in my career, I learned how important that is.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. Well, we're glad to still have you. So what were you like in high school? And do you remember getting in any memorable trouble?
Let's see here. I'll be open and honest. Why not? In high school, I was very quiet. I wasn't somebody that was going to be overly extroverted. That came later in college. I was very, very timid and kind of just quiet and always very academic, always very inclined for education. And that was who I was. And one of the thing was I was kind of quick-witted and sometimes a smart aleck. And and so then moving from Michigan to Alabama, I'll never forget this. I had this English teacher and I said something smart about a particular grade. I got a 96 instead of 100. I was frustrated about that. And I'm not going to mention her name, but she was fine. We actually became very good friends after, like later on in life. Yep. She was very, very supportive. But I was, it's kind of smart and it's kind of, which is not really kind of the culture of the school at the time. And so I got in trouble for that. And in Alabama at the time, they didn't do like corporal punishment or anything like that. But it was, I had to pick weeds outside of the school for 2 hours on 2 different days before school started. So all my friends are pulling up in their cars and we're getting ready to go to school. And I'm out there picking weeds.
Weeds.
But I would tell you, the flower beds at the school look great.
Oh, yeah. Did a nice job. Perfectionist. No.
Yeah.
What are you reading? We keep growing this fantastic book list. And I guess more than anything, is there a book that you think, I know you're like you said, you're a student of this profession. Is there a book that you think everybody should read if they haven't?
Yeah, I mean, I really think 2 books that kind of do the same thing. So I'm going to tell you both of them. Yeah, one is awesome. 7 Strategy Questions. It's 7 basic questions that I think that many people can't answer about their business that they should. And the other one is Playing to Win. Playing to Win is same kind of approach as 5 questions that you should walk through, in my opinion, with your board and your executive team and even your entire leadership team really around your business. I think it speaks to a lot what we should be doing.
That's awesome. Well, link to both of those. The random question. What's the greatest album of all time?
Ooh, that's a tough one. I like so many genres of music and literally everything across the board. There's not anything I don't like. But for me, I would probably say like Abbey Road from the Beatles, but probably more my favorite band of all time is Dave Matthews Band. Okay. I probably would say there's better albums that he did than this, but this is the one that made him famous, that brought his music to light and ultimately where most people know him today. And that's Under the Table and Dreaming.
I think Tansley was also that. So when she was on very early on. So there's a question that I didn't send you and I've never sent a guest in advance. Who's the first person that comes to mind when you hear the word success?
Success? My golf coach, Coach Terry Hopper.
How come?
Yeah. Same kind of thing, his life as a person, as an individual, how he approaches his life. But then from 1978 until 2005, when he retired, he coached both men's and women's golf teams, as well as he was a PhD and a professor. Wow. And so he straddled the fence of both academic and coach, which I think is pretty impressive. And then also in that span of time, he only missed nationals twice.
No kidding. Where'd you go to school?
Only the top 25 schools in the country go to nationals. So that kind of gives you an idea how difficult it is to get there every single year. Yeah. And I went to school. It's a small school in Mobile, Alabama called University of Mobile. And it's a great school, smaller school, but their
Sounds
programs
like a
are
golf powerhouse. So.
It is. Well, there's some advantages for sure. There's a driving range on campus, and the housing for golfers backs up to that. And there's some nice things, but it really was his leadership and the culture that he created that led to our success. And again, still somebody I keep in touch with and on a regular basis.
Well, that is the perfect way to wrap up the show. Thank you again, David, for being here today. My last question for you is, do you have any final thoughts you'd like to share, or any asks of our listeners today?
Yeah, obviously always here to help any way possible. If anybody has any interest or any way that we may be able to help, just, don't hesitate to reach out. We're very visible at our organization, whether it's on our website or LinkedIn, Twitter, Facebook, all the usual stuff. But I think for me, don't be afraid to lean in and be the nerd for your members and be the nerd for your team and be the nerd for our industry. We have an industry that should not be small. We should be the dominant choice for consumers and small businesses around their financial needs. And I think that you got to find a way to win for our team. And it is competitive out there. I don't think we should shy away from that. I think that you need to understand that it is a very challenging world, but we can win. And you can win at any size, and you can win at all sizes. And there's organizations across this great nation, whether it's in South Carolina or California, and you can find examples where both small and large credit unions are creating unparalleled value for their member owners. And I wish you the best in doing so for your team.
Absolutely. Well, thank you again, my friend. We'll link to everything we talked about in the show notes. You kind of mentioned all the different channels, but if people have more questions of you, do you have what's your poison? Email, Twitter, LinkedIn?
It doesn't matter. All of the above.
All of the above.
LinkedIn is probably my chosen professional format. And obviously just find me by name. There's not many Tuyos out there. And then finally also on Twitter at Tuyo CEO is my Twitter handle for work.
Absolutely. Well, have a great day, my friend, and, be well.
Yeah, you too. Yeah, safe travels.
Before we go, I would like to thank all of you for being you and listening today. And once again, a big thank you to David for taking the time out of his, schedule to share these experiences with all of us. And just a huge thank you to our sponsor, PSCU. Our friends at PSCU have been a long-time partner and supporters of ours. So please, make sure to click on their link on the show notes, give them some love, see everything they have going on, helping out all of us in the credit union community. And don't forget to subscribe to the podcast on your favorite player, Apple, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, whichever one you like. Just any of them. Just choose one. We would greatly appreciate it. And last but not least, as always, the CUInsight Experience podcast book list. David added a couple to that list today. It's updated with all the books mentioned through season 1, 2, and now season 3. What a great place to find your next book recommendation from the guests on our show. Thank you all again for listening. Have a great day and be well, friends.